Tartary with Danielle Steele. Slosh some gin with Anna Eastman. It's time to get lit-faced while you are day drinking with authors.
Hey, day drinkers. I told you we'd be right back. So Amber and I had like a time zone, when you live on East Coast time or Pacific Coast time, you just assume that the rest of the world knows what you're talking about. So if you're still sticking around, and I see a few of you are, chime in, say hello. I'm so delighted that you stuck with us. And I'm really excited to have Amber here because we've got a lot to talk about. And I had someone give me a couple of good pointers, and one is that I should actually read the bio of the author that I'm introducing instead of just like forcing you guys to take my word for like who they are and how amazing they are. So let me really quickly introduce you to Amber Garza, who's had a passion for written word since she was a child, making books out of notebook paper and staples. Her hobbies include reading and singing. Coffee and wine are her drinks of choice. I mean, not necessarily in that order. She writes while blaring music and talks about her characters like they're real people. She lives with her husband and 2 kids in Folsom, California, which is also home to another Amber Garza, which is kind of an important detail in this book. So without further ado, let's bring on Amber.
Hi.
You made it. I'm
I
so glad. So for those of you, what I usually do is I like send a link in. I used to do this like tech rehearsal the night before, and then I was like, oh, do we have to do a tech rehearsal the night before? I'll just send the link 10 minutes before, and we should probably do a tech rehearsal. Amber, I am thrilled that you're here.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I feel like first of all, your release was yesterday. Congratulations.
Yeah, Tuesday, but yes, yeah. Same difference.
Okay.
It's all blurred together at this point for me this week.
So you've been really busy. Congratulations on the release.
Thank you so much.
It's a weird time with COVID to have a release, but I saw on Facebook you are getting like people taking pictures out in the wild, all sorts of love.
Yeah, well, I've been at this a really long time, and so I have a great community that's been supportive this whole time and knows what a big deal it is. And so I had asked people, especially with COVID and stuff and not being able to travel myself, I said, like, wherever you are, take pictures and send them to me. So it's been really cool.
So, yeah, the reality is that this is your first sort of like thriller release, but you've been writing romance
for a long time. Yeah.
So tell, like, how did you start writing romance? How did you move to domestic thrillers? Tell me how.
So I always wanted to write. I'm a big mystery thriller fan, and so I always kind of wanted to try my hand at that, but I just didn't know. Nothing ever came to me like an idea for it, and it felt like a really hard thing to force. But romances came really easily to me, and not that romances are easy to write at all, but just I always felt those when I would think of an idea, that's what would come to me. And because I was self-published before, I felt like I had such a great romance fan base. And so I kind of found my niche. I actually was writing mostly young adult, and I did really well with the baseball romances, like sport romances. Yeah. So I did that for a while, and it was so fun, and my fans loved it. And so I just kept doing that. But I had this idea for a long time. And then, self-publishing, it's such an up and down game that after a while, my husband was kind of like, okay, if you're going to keep doing this, that's fine. But then you're probably going to need to get like a full-time job to have like a steady income base, And that's when I thought, well, maybe what I really want to do, because I've always dreamt, obviously, of having my book in bookstores and, having a deal with a big 5 publisher. And so I thought, well, let me try this and then see if I can write full time and justify that,
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to try to write this book once I got this idea, and it had percolated for a while. And so, yeah.
Okay. So another pointer that someone gave me was like, I should read the back cover copy, which is all well and good. But I honestly feel like for your book, for the When I Was You, the tagline, 2 women, 1 life, they both can't have it.
Right.
Says everything you need to know about this really thrilling book. So okay. we're going to get it. So did you write that tagline? Was that from you or was that your publisher?
No, I think my UK publisher came up with that tagline, and then everyone just started using it.
Like, yeah, good. That's good. So
really good.
how long have you had this idea? How long have you been sitting on this idea?
About 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll tell how I
go into it.
So,
go into it.
So 10 years ago, I discovered there's another Amber Garza in my town. So I would go to the gym, and you know how you have like the key fobs. And so my family would go through and do their key fob. I would do mine, and they would always say, "What's your birth date?" And so at one point I finally said, "Why am I the only person that you ever ask my birth date?" And they said, "Well, because there's another Amber Garza who also works out here. And when your pictures come up on the screen, you look fairly similar. So instead of having to go into each account, it'd be just easier if you give your birth date." So I thought, well, that's interesting. And so then I would go to like the doctor's office.
Also, can I see?
Right. Yeah. Can I see what she looks like? Yeah. And then I would go to like doctor's offices, and they'd say, "That's so funny. Another Amber Garza was just here 2 weeks ago." Or I would go to like Blockbuster, and they'd say, "Oh, wait, which Amber Garza are you?" And so I started to think, I told my husband one day, I said, this would be like a great premise for a thriller. Like the whole, like, what if we met and then we wanted each other's lives? That's how it started, was just this what if question.
That's the best way. That's the best, and also this sort of like weird, but largely innocent thing, but that you thought of this really dark undercurrent to all of it.
Yeah.
So for 10 years, you've had this idea. When did you start writing it?
So in 2018, so just a couple of years ago. And then it took me probably about a year to write it. And then I started pitching it the beginning of 2019, right? 2018, oh, something like that. I sold it a year ago. I don't know.
What is time? What is time? You've struggled with this since the minute we met.
Yeah.
So for those of you who maybe have not heard of the book, and I'm sorry, Christy Barrett showed up and she says, I just figured out how to show this stuff. I need to have Amber Garza as Queen Bee, don't you think? And I do. So Christy Barrett and Amber Garza, you guys should hook up because Christy runs an amazing reader community on Facebook.
Oh, yes, I've heard of it. Okay, yeah.
All right, we're making magic happen here. Speaking of magic, real quick side note, this cocktail.
It's so good, right?
So this is called an Old Man Hutch.
Yes.
And who created
it?
A
friend of mine. So I'm a big wine drinker, and I'm not a big cocktail drinker because I don't like sweet. Like I don't like overly sweet cocktails. So a friend of mine, Zach Smith, he created this drink called Old Man Hutch, and he had me try it. And it's kind of like more licoricey. It's got like the whiskey and the licorice flavor. So good. And so anyway, it's like the one cocktail I drink.
It tastes like, the candy like that your grandmother would have that's like hounds, whatever that
is.
Yeah. A little bit like black licorice, but it's a candy. It's a little sweet. It tastes exactly like that.
Yes. I think that's why he called it the Old Man Hutch or something. But he said it's basically like, if you ever wanted to Google the recipe, it's basically a Manhattan, but you take out vermouth and put in the Amaro. So that's how
Amaro being key. The Amaro and the simple syrup being key, which I forgot on the recipe. Sorry, Carolyn, you're asking what's the recipe, and I've screwed it up twice, but the bare bones of it are on my Facebook page. I'll post it. It's posted there. Add simple syrup. It's quite delicious. Okay, so for those of you who have not read this book, it starts off fairly simply where this woman, gets the call from the pediatrician's office and they say, your well baby appointment is, in a few days. And she's like, my child is left for college. So it's this like series of sort of accidents, but then she seeks this person out. She seeks the other woman out, and you've somehow created, and she is stalking her. Like she's stalking her.
Is stalking her.
But she's also really sympathetic. So tell me how you thought about managing that tightrope. This like stalker, but also really sympathetic. I'm like you. I'm not you, but you, the book and the show.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because that was kind of my thing with Kelly is like, Yeah, I don't think she's likable, but I do think you can empathize with her. And I really wanted the reader to feel like they at least understood her to some degree or empathize with her. But I think the real reason that readers can is because when I wrote the book, my son was 19. So her son is 19 in the book. And my husband was working out of town. And I was wrestling with I had never, I write the romances. So I had never written about a woman my age in my stage of life going through something I was going through. So if I would want to process through something, I would blog or whatever.
Right.
But I really felt like in this book, I'm like, you know what? I really want to process through what I'm feeling. Like I want to write about someone like me. Like I want to be able to process through these feelings in my writing in a fictional way. And I want to take it to like this next level, right? Like heighten it. Like if I feel this way, then I want to ratchet that up in the character. And so I think it was really freeing for me because I was able to kind of pour a lot of that loneliness feeling and that my son pulling away from me and how I felt about that into this character, and then I just kind of ratcheted it up to something way darker than what I was feeling. But yeah.
I mean, well, we all feel dark some days, but this is pretty dark. Well, I'm sorry, my dog is barking because my door is shut and she can't come in, and so I gotta let her in.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, enough. She can't figure out how to open the door with her nose. Sorry.
That's funny.
So, did you choose to have her have a son instead of a daughter because you had a son and you were processing these emotions, or
partly that, and partly because I'm always fascinated with like the mother-son relationship, especially when it comes to like thrillers. And I just think it's like I have a daughter as well who's 18, and certainly that's good fodder for fiction too. But I feel like with daughters and moms, it's more like you become friends or you become like each other. But when it's the mother-son, you're like, you have you want to protect your son. You kind of have this mama bear tendency towards your son. You want to be everything to your son. And I do think that in fiction, you can blur that line and there's a madness that comes there. And so I really did want to like explore that in this book. I felt like it would add that whole kind of darker element and a little bit more creepy element to it if she had a son rather than a daughter.
It is. I mean, I have a son and a daughter too. And my son is both of them are in their teens or entering their teens.
Okay.
And his growing up is so different in my perspective than her growing up, because to a large extent, the more she grows up, the more I recognize myself in her. And this guy is in my house. I know I had you. I know that, but there's a part of you that's almost unknowable. And I found that part really both poignant and extremely painful as we got into the thriller aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty exciting. So the other thing that I really, really thought a lot about was how isolated this heroine is. So you have made an extremely sympathetic character who may or may not be having some kind of psychotic break. May or may not be a criminal, but she's also so you've isolated her. Tell us how you isolated her and why you isolated her.
Yeah, so her husband works in the Bay Area and her son's away at college, and she's pretty much alone. And she has the one friend, but other than that, she really doesn't do a lot. She's really at home a lot by herself. And like I said, at the time, I was alone a lot because my husband was working out of town and my kids were at an age where they didn't really hang out with me a lot. I'm an extrovert, so I'm not really this character because I do a lot of stuff with my girlfriends. I'm out a lot. But with her, I did want to make it like this claustrophobic feeling. And I feel also like when you are alone a lot, that is kind of when your mind can go to weird places. And so with her, I felt like her loneliness was like another character in some ways, like her isolation and her loneliness, because it fostered this kind of insanity in her, being alone and her thoughts able to race in these different ways, So I felt almost like she needed to be isolated. And I felt like it gave the novel like a claustrophobia that I really liked.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like the quintessential domestic thriller in that she is alone in her house or in her life so much. And then you also, this is a hard book to talk about because you don't want to.
I know. Everybody says that, and it's so true.
But I mean, I'm not giving away spoilers. There, something's happening. Psychotic break. What there? You run through the gamut until about 68% in the digital version. Then you're like, oh no. But so tell us how you like manage that part of it, because you have flashbacks of memory that are very sweet. You have these moments where you as a reader are not sure if it's real or not.
Right.
You have quite a few of those. So tell us how you manage that part of it.
Okay. So I always say that I write in layers. And so I have like a initial draft that I write just to get the story out of my head, but it's very bare bones. And often, like if I don't outline really well, like I didn't outline well with this book. So like my first draft ended up going a totally different direction actually than this one did. And I rewrote like this whole second half.
Like how? Like what happened? Like how? I mean, if you can tell us, like what was the first draft like?
Well, if I do, then it'll be kind of a spoiler for what doesn't, so I went a different direction.
You email me.
Yes, offline, we'll totally talk about it. So, but I have a beta reader, Megan, and she reads all my work as I write it. And so she would kind of like, oh, I don't know, you kind of feel like it's going off track here or whatever. Or I thought you were going to go here. And then I'd be like, oh, that would have been better. So
Interesting.
And so I would always go back to the drawing board. And then when I actually brainstorm a lot with my son. And my son is the one that helped me figure out to do it in 3 parts. And he's the one who had the idea for the second part twist that happens like 5 pages into part 2. So he was kind of like, I think you should do this. And then I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. And once I got that and it clicked, then I was like, okay, I can do this now. So then I rewrote it. And then actually a lot of those like flashbacks and the scenes with her psychiatrist and that kind of stuff came in like a 3rd or 4th layering of the book, where I was like, okay, I want to add in some, now that I know where it ends, need to add in some more points where I'm giving the reader little breadcrumbs along the way. So that's kind of what I'll do. I'll kind of layer things in. And then usually, I don't know, draft 5 or 6 is when I'll go through and try to do the pacing. So like ending each chapter with a cliffhanger so that people can't just go to bed. So I think through different things every draft.
So was this written when you sold it?
Yeah, I finished it when I sold it. So I had finished the book whatever year that was. And then it was in January that I started pitching it, and then to agents. And then I found my agent, and then she started pitching it in like March or something, and it went to auction in April, and then it sold. So
oh wow.
Yeah. So it was finished. I mean, it went through obviously edits with my agent and then edits with my editor. It was never quite finished until now.
Right, and even now, I mean, if you read it now, no author should, once the book is out, don't ever read it again.
It's so funny that you say that, because I did listen to some of the audiobook, and there was one part where I was like, wait, was that consistent throughout? And I started like flipping through the book, and then I'm like, you know what? It's too late. It was, but it was just funny, like how I was starting to panic already. Like, wait, I need to edit through something again.
Well, some of that's like the self-publishing part of it, where, in self-publishing, nothing ever has to be done. Like you can change the cover, you can change the back blurb, and not that you can't do that in publishing, but it so rarely happens.
Right.
So how is this experience? And you're having a beautiful experience, COVID or not, but like, how is that versus self-publishing? Are you enjoying losing control, or do you wish you had a bit more control?
No, it's funny because I thought I was going to struggle with that, to be honest, because I was used to doing all the things, and I was used to being able to have all the control. What I think has been so great about this experience has been having a team. Like, it's just been so nice to have, like, go through edits with my agent and go through edits with my editor and realize, wow, with their ideas, it's so much stronger. Like, I never would have thought that. I'm only one brain, so I only think through so far, and then they could see things I didn't see. And that has been great. And especially working on the second book, because you get in your head so much once you've sold the first one. And so it's been really helpful to be able to go to like my agent and go, I am freaking out. Here's what I have. Help me fix it. And then know that I have somebody to help me get me back on track. And so I've really enjoyed it. And like working with my PR team, it's so nice because they have ideas that, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and in my mind, I'm like, I do it this way. And then, and then they'd be like, oh, well, this would be better. And then I'm like, oh, that is way better. That's why it worked before, So I really liked it.
You know, I've always felt like in every relationship with a publisher that I've had that like, you know, we're all in it together, right? Like
Right.
the editor's a coach, the
Right.
agents, you know, man, you know, like we're all
Yeah.
towards the same thing. So that's really, really exciting.
Yeah. Like you have a team and it's nice because it's such a solitary thing, you know, writing. And so it is, I feel like it's nice to have a team of people that are behind me.
And in COVID, I've done a bunch of these interviews, and there are right now literally two kinds of authors: the ones that are able to like push through and get some work done, and the ones that cannot get their shit together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just surf Twitter all day. How are you doing? Where are you falling in that?
I'm kind of a mixture of both. Like I have days where I'm really good. The beginning of it, I was still working through book 2 and I was already struggling with book 2. And then to have this happen, I was like, oh, I'm a mess. Like I'm just done. Like 2 in the afternoon, I'm like breaking out the wine fridge. I'm like, that's it. This is terrible. And I realized through this that I'm a person that likes, like I glean a lot of creativity by being out. Like I like to be out. Like I'm not a person that just wrote at home. I would go to coffee shops or go meet a friend and we'd write together. And so when the pandemic first hit, it was like, we live in a fairly small space and both of my kids were doing college at home now. And it was like, and my husband was home the first month and I was like, oh, I'm done. Like I can't, you know, and you know, writing sometimes looks like this. Because you're thinking, and every time I would be like this, they'd be like, oh, good, you're done. Okay, mom, so we need, you know, my husband would be like, great, you want to go on a bike ride? I'm like, oh my gosh, I was trying to work out a plot point and you just completely. So it was hard at first, but I've had to find like my rhythms and figure, you have to figure it out at some point, especially if you're on deadlines. But it definitely, for me, it has not made it easier.
No. And so what can you tell us about your next book? What's your next?
So I've already turned it in. It's tentatively titled Where I Left Her. And it's about a single mom, Whitney, and she drops off her 15-year-old daughter, Amelia, at a new friend's house, Lauren. She watches her walk up to the door. Lauren opens the door. They both wave at her, go inside. She goes to pick her daughter up the next day, and an elderly woman answers the door and has no idea who Amelia or Lauren is or what she's talking about. So that's what it's about.
I love it. It's funny because you know there's a big thread through When I Was You about like, I mean, not just motherhood, which I mean, you know, the first Kelly. I'm sorry, I'm going to get the name wrong.
Yeah, so Kelly 1, Kelly 2. That's what I call it.
Kelly 2. The first Kelly, you know, her child has left the house, and the second Kelly is much younger with an infant. And so it's a lot about motherhood. It's a lot about single motherhood, because even Kelly 1, you know, her husband was not around or super supportive.
Right.
And Kelly 2 is very long, but it's also about how moms judge each other.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Like, you know, so Kelly 1's this single, Kelly 2 is the single mom, and Kelly 1 shows up and the house is a wreck and she clearly hasn't slept. And we've all been there, even if you have, you know, a spouse and grandparents and 1,000 people around to help you, you've had those days. But when Kelly 1 judges her, I'm like, yeah, well, maybe she isn't, you know? So how did you balance that? Because, you know, it's easy, it's low hanging fruit to judge other mothers, but yours.
Right. Well, and I thought when I wrote it, I did think that was intentional. Like I definitely have felt mom shamed as a mom, like we all have, right? And and I don't even know if other people mean to do that. I know it's great. It's such a good treat. I don't even know if other moms mean to do it. I think a lot of times we're shaming ourselves. Like I felt so much mom guilt over things that I've talked to my kids as adults about, that they're like, oh no, I never thought like I never thought that, or, you know, and so I feel like we put a lot on ourselves. And I know, like, I would look at other moms, like, you know, I'm a creative mom, so I was never good at like remembering my kids' schedule. My husband would have to say, like, remember they have a minimum day. You'd have to call me, you know, and then I wasn't the mom doing science projects in the backyard or whatever, but I knew moms that were really good at those things. And I would feel like, oh man, my poor kids, you know, or I don't bake. And my daughter loves cakes, you know, so I'd be like, oh, I wish I was better at that for her. But at some point you realize that you're doing the best you can. And I really did want to show that in the book, like how they were shaming each other, both of them. Certainly Kelly 2 was shaming Kelly 1 and how she raised her son, and vice versa. But I was hoping that the reader would get that wasn't my feelings, like this was these characters and showing this toxic thing that women do to each other at times, or even to ourselves at times,
It's interesting, sort of going back to the isolation of Kelly 1. Like, she has this friend who's kind of, is she a friend? You're never really like secure in that knowledge of friendship, who's also a mom. And I started to wonder, like, was she pushing these people away on purpose? Like the husband with his relationship with their son, was she like, all right, well then I'm just going to sort of not worry about what you think or how you feel in this regard? Like, was that a plan on your part? This how much of her psychosis and isolation was
like self-inflicted?
Yeah.
I definitely think that. I felt like one of the things that I really felt very deeply about Kelly 1 was that she didn't know who she was. And she put everything into her son. Like, her whole identity was in that child. And I think she justified that by saying, well, I don't have this great marriage, or my husband's not very nice to my son. Like, I feel like she justified a lot of her actions by, well, this external force is forcing me to have to be overbearing for my son or overprotective of my son. But she put her everything into that child. And I think that now she was looking like, he's in college, my husband's gone, it's just me, and I don't know me, and I don't know who I am. And she didn't really want to be anything other than that. Like, she could have went and found herself, but for some reason she couldn't get past who she was as a mom and wanting that back. Because I think she just had gained something in that relationship that she didn't want to let go of.
Right. I mean, it was, there's a comment here from Sharon. I'm going to show it because I just, once again, learned how to show these things. I haven't read a suspense thriller in a while, but these sound great. I have trouble sleeping after reading things like this, but I have trouble sleeping anyway, so who cares? I mean, so okay at all. But the really crazy thing about this thriller, and I was going to put that in quotes, but I'm not going to, because it is a thriller. Like, the pages turn so fast. Is that it's actually, and not like the twist is delicious and the second half is twist after twist after twist. But until then, you're so wrapped up, and I'm so truly sympathetic with her. Like,
right. Yeah.
Worried about it. I mean, it's not mean or malicious or scary in that way. It's just like a woman on her own who has mental trouble, who needs better people around her.
She really didn't have, I mean, I liked Christine as a character a lot. She was fun to write. But yeah, Kelly for sure did not have anyone in her life that really cared for her. I felt like the one person she had in her life that cared for her was Carmen, was her mother-in-law, who had passed away. But at least I wanted her to have somebody that was at one point in her life, that had cared for her.
That it was her husband's mom. Like, it was a nice time knitting that together.
Yeah.
Well, Amber, I cannot wait for the second book. So do you have a tentative pub date?
I don't know. I turned it in. We've gone through one round of edits, but I haven't gotten any news on that yet.
COVID's making everything super tricky.
But I'm pretty sure it'll be 2021 at some point. So.
Well, I will be first in line to grab it. I really will.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks. I'm sure you just left whatever you were doing to be like, wait a second, 4.
No, I'm just home today. I was just going to write, but I threw on a kimono, so I wasn't just in my sweats, and here I am.
Well, I really appreciate it. Go make yourself one of these delicious drinks. And
I will.
I really do appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. This is my last Facebook Live. I'm taking this whole thing to a podcast after this. And I was telling everybody that I've got Ellen Hildebrand in.
Oh, that's exciting.
I know. COVID has made everybody desperate to reach readers. I'm here. Thank you, Amber,
thank you so much
for being here. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, all you guys. Stay home, stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, read a book.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Bye.